There are moments when heaven touches earth so quietly that most people miss it entirely. They walk past miracles disguised as ordinary afternoons, dismissing divine whispers as coincidence or childish imagination. But Emma Sullivan saw what others couldn't see, and what she saw at the iron gates of Blessed Sacrament Elementary School in Portland would shatter every rational explanation the adult world tried to build around her. If you also need a miracle, subscribe and join the prayers of the Virgin Mary. It started on a September morning when the fog still clung to the sidewalks like wet wool. Emma Sullivan, 9 years old with copper-colored braids and freckles scattered across her nose like cinnamon dust, stood at the school entrance gripping her mother's hand tighter than usual. Rebecca Sullivan barely noticed at first. She was mentally cataloging her day, the deadlines at the law firm, the groceries she needed to pick up, the parent-teacher conference she'd rescheduled twice. Single motherhood after the divorce had turned her into a woman who moved through life at double speed, always half distracted, always catching up. "Mama, she's here again," Emma whispered, her voice carrying that particular tone children use when they're reporting something they know adults won't believe. Rebecca glanced down at her daughter, then followed her gaze toward the wrought iron gates where parents were dropping off backpack-laden children in a familiar morning chaos. "Who's here, sweetheart?" "The woman in blue, the one who smiles at me." Rebecca's stomach tightened with the instinctive worry of a mother whose child might be talking to strangers. She scanned the crowd, harried fathers checking phones, mothers in yoga pants clutching travel mugs, the crossing guard in his neon vest. No woman in blue, no one paying any particular attention to Emma. "I don't see anyone, honey. What does she look like?" Emma's eyes never left the gates. "She's beautiful. Her dress is so blue it looks like the sky just fell down and wrapped around her. And she glows a little, like when you hold a flashlight under a bedsheet. She's waving at me." A cold sensation crept down Rebecca's spine. Not quite fear, but something close to it. She knelt beside Emma, checking her daughter's forehead for fever with the back of her hand. Cool. Normal. "Are you feeling okay? Did you have bad dreams last night?" "I'm not sick, Mama, and I'm not making it up." Emma's voice carried a note of frustration that surprised Rebecca. Her daughter was typically gentle, accommodating, eager to please. This defensive edge was new. Rebecca stood, still searching the crowd. Nothing. No woman in blue. No one remotely matching the description. Just the ordinary chaos of morning drop-off at a Catholic elementary school in Northeast Portland, with its brick facade and statue of the Sacred Heart keeping watch over the entrance. Maybe it was a shadow or someone walking by really fast, Rebecca offered, knowing even as she spoke that the explanation sounded hollow. Emma shook her head slowly, her gaze still fixed on the gates. "She's not a shadow. She's more real than real, if that makes sense. And Mama, she knows my name." That stopped Rebecca cold. "What do you mean she knows your name?" She said it, not out loud with her mouth, but I heard it anyway, inside my head. "Emma," she said. "Emma, you are so loved." Just like that. Rebecca's heart began to hammer in a way that had nothing to do with her morning coffee. This was more than imagination. This was detailed, specific, the kind of thing that made mothers lie awake at night, Googling childhood hallucinations and early-onset psychiatric conditions. "Listen to me, Em. If anyone, and I mean anyone, approaches you or tries to talk to you, you tell a teacher immediately. And you tell me. Do you understand?" Emma finally tore her eyes from the gates and looked up at her mother with an expression that seemed far too old for her 9 years. "She's not scary, Mama. She's not like that. She makes me feel safe, like nothing bad could ever happen when she's there." Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to forbid her daughter from engaging with invisible women in blue dresses. But the school bell was ringing and Emma was already pulling away, joining the stream of children flowing through the gates. Rebecca watched her daughter disappear into the building, copper braids bouncing, and felt a mother's primal unease settle into her bones. That afternoon, when Rebecca picked Emma up, her daughter was unusually quiet during the drive home. Rebecca tried the usual prompts. "How was your day?" What did you learn in math? Did you play with Sophia at recess? But received only monosyllabic responses. It wasn't until they were sitting at the kitchen table, Emma methodically working through her spelling homework, that the child spoke unprompted. She told me something about Mrs. Donovan. Rebecca looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reviewing a brief. Who told you something? The woman in blue. At dismissal, when you were waiting in the car line, I saw her again. She was standing by the flagpole and she looked sad, really sad. And she told me that Mrs. Donovan is sick. Claire Donovan was Emma's third-grade teacher, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and an infectious laugh that made children actually want to learn about fractions and state capitals. Rebecca had met her at back-to-school night and immediately liked her. She was the type of teacher who remembered not just her students' names but their siblings' names, their pets' names, their favorite books. Mrs. Donovan seemed fine this morning, Rebecca said carefully. Did she look sick today? She looks fine, but she's not fine. The woman told me Mrs. Donovan is sick inside where no one can see, and she needs help soon, or something really bad will happen. The hair on Rebecca's arms stood up. This was no longer vague child's play, this was specific, alarming, the kind of thing that could get a parent called into the principal's office if word got around that Emma was making ominous predictions about staff members. Emma, listen to me. You cannot say things like that about your teacher. Do you understand? You could get Mrs. Donovan in trouble or worry people for no reason. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Not the manipulative tears children sometimes deploy when they're not getting their way, but genuine tears of frustration and fear. But what if she's really sick, Mama? What if the woman in blue is trying to warn us? What if we could help her and we don't because nobody believes me? Rebecca felt torn between her instinct to protect her daughter's tender heart and her rational adult understanding that 9-year-olds don't receive medical diagnoses from invisible women. Sweetheart, Mrs. Donovan is a grown-up. If she's not feeling well, she'll go to the doctor. That's not something for you to worry about. But Emma wasn't consoled. She pushed away from the table, her spelling words half finished, and went to her room. Rebecca heard the door close, not slam. Emma never slammed doors, just a quiet, definitive click that somehow felt worse than any tantrum. That night, after Emma was asleep, Rebecca stood in her daughter's doorway watching the rise and fall of the child's breathing beneath her quilt. Emma slept with her hands folded under her cheek, looking impossibly young and innocent. Rebecca found herself whispering a prayer she hadn't uttered in years, not since the divorce, not since the angry arguments and custody battles had made God feel distant and disinterested. If something's wrong, show me. If my daughter needs help, give me a sign. Please. She felt foolish the moment the words left her mouth. Praying to a God she'd stopped really believing in, asking for signs like some desperate character in a made-for-TV movie. But mothers do desperate things when their children seem to be slipping into territory they can't navigate alone. The next morning, Emma saw the woman in blue again, and this time she wasn't alone. Rebecca was running late. She'd slept through her alarm, burned the toast, couldn't find Emma's library book, so they arrived at school during the tail end of drop-off when the crowd had thinned. Emma climbed out of the car and immediately froze, her backpack dangling from one hand. She's there, Emma said, pointing. And Mama, there's light all around her. So much light. Rebecca put the car in park right there in the drop-off lane, ignoring the annoyed honk from the minivan behind her. She got out and rounded the car, standing beside Emma, following her daughter's pointing finger. Nothing. Empty sidewalk. Morning sun filtering through the maple trees. Absolutely nothing unusual. But Emma's face. Emma's face was transfixed, radiant, as if she were watching the most beautiful thing imaginable. Her lips moved silently, as if she were listening to words Rebecca couldn't hear. What is she saying? Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma's eyes never wavered. She says I shouldn't be afraid, that she's been watching over our family for a very long time, that my great-grandmother knew her too. Emma paused, tilted her head as if listening more intently. She says her name is Mary, and that she needs me to be brave because Mrs. Donovan doesn't have much time. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Rebecca's rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that children don't have mystical visions in school parking lots, that there must be a psychological explanation, a medical cause, something that made sense. But another part of her, the part that had been raised Catholic, that had attended Mass every Sunday until life got complicated, that remembered kneeling beside her own grandmother as they said the rosary, that part of her felt something like recognition. "Get in the car, Emma." "But Mama, school." "Get in the car. Now." They didn't go home. Rebecca drove in silence while Emma sat in the passenger seat still and watchful. After 20 minutes, they pulled into the parking lot of St. Michael's Church, the parish Rebecca's grandmother had attended for 60 years before she passed. The building was old stone, solid and gray, with stained glass windows that caught the morning light and turned it into rivers of color. "Are we going to Mass?" Emma asked, surprised. "We're going to talk to Father Quinn." Father Patrick Quinn was in his 70s with silver hair and hands that shook slightly from essential tremor. He'd buried Rebecca's grandmother, baptized Emma, and never once made Rebecca feel judged for her spotty attendance. When he opened the parish office door and saw them standing there, Rebecca with circles under her eyes, Emma clutching her mother's hand, he simply smiled and said, "Come in, I'll put on tea." They sat in his book-lined office, surrounded by theological texts and photos of mission trips to Guatemala. Rebecca told him everything: the woman in blue, the warnings about Mrs. Donovan, Emma's strange certainty, and the impossible details she couldn't have known. Father Quinn listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful. When Rebecca finished, he turned to Emma. "This woman, you see, how does she make you feel?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Safe. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like everything's going to be okay even when it doesn't look okay." Father Quinn nodded slowly. "And you're not afraid of her?" "No, Father. I'm only afraid that nobody will listen in time to help Mrs. Donovan." The priest was quiet for a long moment, his tea cooling in his hands. Then he said something that would change everything. "Rebecca, do you remember what was your grandmother's most treasured possession?" Rebecca blinked at the apparent subject change. "Her statue of Mary, the one that had been in her family for generations. She left it to me in her will, but I haven't unpacked it yet. It's still in a box in the garage. I think," Father Quinn said gently, "you should find that statue tonight. And Emma, I think you should look at it carefully and tell your mother if it reminds you of anyone." The statue had been packed away for 3 years, wrapped in newspaper and bubble wrap, buried beneath Christmas decorations and old tax returns in a corner of the garage that Rebecca rarely ventured into. That evening, after a mostly silent dinner where Emma pushed peas around her plate and Rebecca pretended to read emails on her phone, they stood together in the dusty space staring at a stack of cardboard boxes. "Which one is it?" Emma asked, her voice small in the cavernous garage. Rebecca pointed to a medium-sized box labeled in her grandmother's spidery handwriting. "Blessed Mother, handle with prayer." Even after 3 years, the sight of those words in her grandmother's hand made Rebecca's throat tighten. Margaret O'Connell had been a woman of unshakable faith, the kind who never missed daily Mass, who could recite the rosary from memory while making dinner, who saw divine providence in everything from recovered lost keys to unexpected rainstorms that watered her garden at just the right time. After she died, Rebecca had promised herself she'd find the perfect place for the statue, somewhere visible and honored. Instead, it had languished in the garage like so many good intentions, victim to the chaos of divorce and single parenthood and the quiet erosion of faith that happens when prayers seem to go unanswered and life feels relentlessly difficult. Rebecca cut through the packing tape with more force than necessary, as if she were angry at the box itself. Inside, beneath layers of protective wrapping, the statue emerged. 18 inches tall, hand-painted porcelain, depicting Mary in flowing robes of deep blue and white, her hands extended in a gesture of welcome, her face serene and achingly beautiful. The statue had been in the O'Connell family for 4 generations, brought over from Ireland by Rebecca's great-great-grandmother in 1889. Emma gasped, not a small, surprised gasp, but a sharp intake of breath that made Rebecca turn quickly to check if her daughter was hurt. "That's her," Emma whispered. "That's the woman from the school gates." Rebecca felt something shift in her chest, like tectonic plates realigning. She looked at the statue, really looked at it, and then at her daughter's face, which had gone pale except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. "Emma, are you absolutely certain?" Emma nodded, reaching out tentatively to touch the statue's extended hand. "Same dress, same face, same way she looks at you like she knows everything you're thinking and loves you anyway. Mama, that's her. That's Mary. The Virgin Mary has been standing outside my school." Rebecca sank down onto an overturned crate, the statue heavy in her hands. Her mind raced through explanations. Emma must have seen the statue before, remembered it subconsciously, projected the memory. But they'd been living in this house for 3 years, and the statue had been packed the entire time. Emma would have been 6 when they moved. Probably wouldn't remember a statue from her great-grandmother's house that she'd only visited a handful of times as a very small child. "Father Quinn said we should bring it to him," Emma said quietly. "Can we go back tomorrow?" Rebecca nodded numbly. She carried the statue inside and placed it on the mantel in the living room, where it seemed to watch over them with those painted eyes that somehow managed to be both distant and intimately present. That night, Rebecca dreamed of her grandmother for the first time since the funeral. Not a sad dream of loss, but a vivid, almost tangible presence. In the dream, Margaret stood in her old kitchen, hands dusted with flour from making soda bread, and said simply, "Some things skip a generation, Becca. Your daughter has a gift. Don't waste it being afraid." The next day was Saturday. They returned to St. Michael's with the statue wrapped carefully in a dish towel. Father Quinn took one look at it, and his eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "I remember when your grandmother brought this to be blessed after she inherited it from her mother," he said, running his fingers gently over the base. "She told me it had survived the crossing from Ireland, the Great Depression, a house fire in 1923. She believed this statue had protected her family through every trial." "Father, my daughter is seeing the Virgin Mary," Rebecca said bluntly. "That's what you think is happening, isn't it? You think she's having actual visions." Father Quinn set the statue carefully on his desk. "I think Emma is seeing something. Whether it's a genuine mystical experience or a psychological phenomenon, I'm not qualified to say definitively. But I know this. The Church has documented thousands of Marian apparitions throughout history, Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, and in almost every case, the visionary was a child or young person. The messages were often warnings or calls to prayer, and there were always skeptics even among the faithful until something undeniable happened." "Like what?" Rebecca demanded. "What would be undeniable?" "Like Mrs. Donovan," Emma said quietly. Both adults turned to look at her. "The lady keeps showing me Mrs. Donovan. Every time I see her now, she points toward the school and looks sad, and I keep hearing the same words. Time is short. She must be examined. God's mercy waits, but the body doesn't." Father Quinn leaned forward. "Emma, has the lady told you anything specific about what's wrong with Mrs. Donovan?" Emma closed her eyes, as if trying to replay a memory. She points to her head. "Right here." Emma touched her left temple. "And she shows me darkness, like a shadow growing bigger. She says the doctors can help, but only if they look soon. Very soon." Rebecca felt sick. This was crossing a line from spiritual experience into something that could have real-world consequences. "We can't just walk up to Claire Donovan and tell her my 9-year-old is having visions that she has a brain tumor." "No," Father Quinn agreed. "But perhaps there's another way." Claire Donovan had been teaching for 17 years, and in that time she'd learned to read the signs when a parent was about to deliver bad news. The request for an urgent meeting outside school hours was rarely followed by anything good. So when Rebecca Sullivan emailed asking to meet at a coffee shop on Sunday afternoon, Claire's first thought was that Emma was being pulled from her class, transferring schools perhaps, or being homeschooled. It happened sometimes, and it always stung. They met at a small cafe on Alberta Street where Sunday afternoon crowds provided enough ambient noise that their conversation wouldn't carry. Rebecca arrived first, already seated at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a mug she didn't seem to be drinking from. When Claire slid into the seat across from her, Rebecca's face was drawn with exhaustion. "Thank you for meeting me," Rebecca began. "I know this is unusual." "Is Emma okay?" Claire asked immediately. "Emma's fine. This is going to sound strange. Actually, it's going to sound insane." Claire had been a teacher long enough to have heard truly strange things. Parents convinced their children were possessed, learning disabilities blamed on vaccines, elaborate theories about curriculum conspiracies. She'd learned to keep her face neutral and her mind open. "Try me." Rebecca took a breath. "Emma has been seeing a woman at the school gates. A woman no one else can see. She describes her as wearing blue, glowing slightly, extraordinarily beautiful. After some investigation, we're fairly certain, or at least Father Quinn at St. Michael's believes, that Emma is seeing the Virgin Mary." Claire blinked. Of all the things she'd been prepared to hear, this wasn't on the list. "The Virgin Mary, as in the mother of Jesus." "I know how it sounds," Rebecca said quickly. "Believe me, I'm a lawyer. I deal in evidence and facts. If my daughter were seeing anyone else's child experience this, I'd be suggesting psychiatric evaluation. But there are details she couldn't possibly know, connections she couldn't have made. And Claire..." Rebecca paused, her hands tightening around her mug. "The woman has been giving Emma a message about you." The cafe noise seemed to fade. Claire felt her heartbeat accelerate in that particular way it did when something was very wrong. "About me?" "She says you're sick. Specifically that there's something wrong in your head." Rebecca touched her left temple, exactly where Emma had indicated. "She says it's urgent, that you need to be examined immediately, that time is running short." Claire leaned back in her chair, her initial concern shifting toward irritation. "Rebecca, I appreciate whatever concern you're feeling, but I'm perfectly healthy. I feel fine. This sounds like a child's overactive imagination being given far too much credence." "I thought the same thing," Rebecca admitted. "I still think that 90% of the time. But there's this 10% that can't explain how Emma knew details about the statue that's been in my garage for 3 years, or how she's describing a figure that matches centuries-old depictions of Mary, or why a priest with 50 years of experience thinks this might be legitimate." Claire softened slightly. She'd noticed that Emma had been quieter in class lately, more withdrawn. Children going through stress at home often manifested it in unusual ways. Perhaps this vision was Emma's way of processing her parents' divorce, projecting anxiety onto her teacher as a safe authority figure. "Listen, Rebecca, I understand you're concerned, but I'm not having symptoms of anything. No headaches, no vision problems, no dizziness. Nothing that would suggest a neurological issue. That's the thing," Rebecca pressed. "According to Emma, or according to what Emma says Mary is telling her, you wouldn't have symptoms yet. Not ones you'd notice. That's why it's so urgent." Claire felt a flash of genuine anger. "So I'm supposed to make a doctor's appointment, go through the expense and trouble of testing based on what? A child's vision? Do you have any idea how that sounds?" "I do," Rebecca said quietly. "I sound like someone who's either desperate or delusional. Maybe both. But Claire, what if I'm right? What if there is something wrong and catching it early makes all the difference? Then I'd have symptoms." "Not necessarily. Not always." Rebecca pulled out her phone, showing Claire a series of articles she'd clearly been researching. "I spent the last 2 nights reading about brain tumors. Gliomas, meningiomas, acoustic neuromas. Some of them are asymptomatic in early stages. Some people don't know anything's wrong until it's quite advanced." Claire pushed the phone away. "Rebecca, I can't live my life chasing down every medical what-if. None of us would ever leave our houses if we followed every anxiety-driven rabbit hole on the internet. I'm not asking you to chase every what if. I'm asking you to get one scan, one MRI. If it's clear, I'll never mention this again. Emma will work through whatever she's processing, we'll all move on. And if I refuse? Rebecca's face crumpled slightly. Then I have to live with knowing I didn't do everything possible to warn you. And Emma has to live with believing the Virgin Mary asked her to deliver a message that no one listened to. Claire stood abruptly. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I appreciate Emma as a student and I can see you're genuinely worried. But I'm not making medical decisions based on mystical visions. I hope Emma gets the support she needs to work through whatever's happening with her. I really do. She left the cafe without finishing her coffee, walking quickly to her car with her heart pounding in a way that felt like anger, but might have been something else. Fear, perhaps. Or the unsettling sensation of a door opening in her mind that she'd prefer to keep shut. That night, alone in her apartment, Claire stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time looking at her reflection. She looked fine, healthy. Her eyes were clear, her skin normal, nothing visibly wrong. She touched her left temple where Rebecca had indicated, half expecting to feel something. A bump, a tender spot, anything. Nothing. She went to bed determined to forget the entire bizarre conversation. But at 3 a.m, she woke from a nightmare she couldn't quite remember, her heart racing, and found herself whispering into the darkness. If something's really wrong with me, I need to know. The next morning, against every rational instinct, she called her doctor's office and scheduled an appointment. I'd like to request an MRI, she said. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'd really like to rule out any neurological issues. The nurse on the other end was professional and unconcerned. Any symptoms prompting this request? Claire hesitated. Just a feeling. Call it intuition. 3 weeks later, Claire Donovan sat in a neurologist's office looking at images of her own brain backlit on a screen, while Dr. Sarah Chen pointed to a small, irregular shadow on the left side that looked like a smudge, a mistake in the printing, anything except what it actually was. It's a grade 2 astrocytoma, Dr. Chen said gently. Low-grade glioma, slow-growing, but definitely present, about 2 centimeters currently. Claire heard the words, but they seemed to arrive from a great distance as if she were underwater. I don't understand. I feel fine. That's actually not uncommon with slow-growing tumors in this location. They can be asymptomatic for months or even years. The surrounding brain tissue gradually compensates as the tumor grows. By the time patients have symptoms, the tumor is often substantially larger. How much larger? Dr. Chen pulled up comparison images on her tablet. If this had gone undetected for another 6 months to a year, you'd likely be looking at a significantly more complicated situation. As it stands, we caught it early. Surgery is absolutely possible and your prognosis is very good, particularly because you're young, healthy, and we're intervening now. Claire felt tears sliding down her face before she realized she was crying. I almost didn't get the scan. I thought I was being paranoid. Well, whatever made you decide to get checked out probably saved your life. Early detection with these tumors is everything. What made her get checked out? A 9-year-old girl's vision of the Virgin Mary, a desperate mother in a coffee shop, a message that Claire had initially dismissed as absurd. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later at Oregon Health and Science University Hospital. Claire took medical leave from school, and Principal Marcus Brennan sent a carefully worded email to parents explaining that Mrs. Donovan would be out temporarily for a medical procedure, and that a substitute would be taking over her 3rd grade class. Emma Sullivan read the email over her mother's shoulder that evening. She listened, Emma whispered. Mrs. Donovan listened, and now the doctors can help her. Rebecca pulled her daughter into a tight hug, feeling the bird-thin bones of her child's back through her school uniform. You were very brave to deliver that message, sweetheart. It wasn't me, Emma said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. The lady did it. She chose Mrs. Donovan to save. She's been protecting her this whole time, even before I could see her. That night, Rebecca returned to St. Michael's Church alone. It was nearly midnight, but she knew Father Quinn kept a key available for anyone needing to pray outside regular hours. She let herself into the empty sanctuary, where votive candles flickered in red glass containers and the stained glass windows were black against the night sky. She knelt in a pew near the front, in front of the statue of Mary that stood in a side alcove surrounded by flowers parishioners had brought. It wasn't the same statue as her grandmother's, but the face was similar, that serene, sorrowful expression that seemed to contain both perfect peace and perfect understanding of human pain. "I don't know if you're really appearing to my daughter," Rebecca whispered into the darkness. "I don't know if I believe in miracles or if this is all just extraordinary coincidence. But if you are real, if you did warn us about Claire, then thank you. Thank you for saving her. Thank you for using Emma, even though it scared me to death." She sat in silence for a long time, not praying exactly, just present in the stillness. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she felt something shift inside her. Not a dramatic conversion experience, not a vision or a voice, just a gentle loosening of the tight, defended place in her heart that had closed after the divorce. A crack of light getting in. She didn't know if Mary was real. She didn't know if her daughter was a mystic or a child processing trauma in an unusual way. But she knew that Claire Donovan was alive and would survive because someone had listened to an impossible message. And sometimes, maybe that was enough. The day of Claire's surgery, Emma asked if they could pray the rosary. Rebecca hadn't prayed the rosary since her grandmother died, could barely remember the sequence of prayers. But Emma guided her through it with confidence that seemed far beyond her years. They knelt in the living room in front of the statue, Emma's small fingers working through the beads while Rebecca stumbled through the Hail Marys. "She's there," Emma said suddenly, her eyes on the statue. "Right now, she's there at the hospital with Mrs. Donovan. She's holding her hand while the doctors work. She promised me Mrs. Donovan won't be alone." Rebecca looked at her daughter's face, so certain and peaceful, and chose to believe her. The surgery took 6 hours. Dr. Chen successfully removed the entire visible tumor with clean margins. Claire woke in recovery with a shaved patch on her head, a row of staples, and the overwhelming knowledge that she'd just been given her life back. 2 weeks later, still recovering but already cleared for light activity, Claire Donovan appeared at Rebecca Sullivan's front door on a Saturday morning, carrying a bakery box. "I brought cinnamon rolls," she said, when Rebecca opened the door. "I needed to talk to Emma." They sat in the living room, Claire, Rebecca, and Emma, with the cinnamon rolls between them and the statue of Mary on the mantel watching over them. Claire turned to Emma, this small girl with copper braids who'd apparently been the instrument of her salvation. "I need you to know something," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "The doctors told me that if I'd waited another 6 months, the tumor would have been inoperable. I would have died, Emma, probably within a year or 2. You saved my life." Emma looked down at her hands, suddenly shy. "I didn't do anything. It was the lady. She's the one who wanted you to be okay." "Then tell the lady thank you from me. Tell her." Claire's voice broke. "Tell her I'm going to live differently now. I'm going to pay attention to things I was too busy to notice before. I'm going to believe in impossible things." "She already knows," Emma said simply. "She's standing right behind you." Both women turned instinctively, seeing nothing but the ordinary living room. But Emma smiled at the empty space, as if greeting an old friend. "She says you're welcome. And she says this wasn't just for you, Mrs. Donovan. It was for all the children you're going to teach, all the people you're going to touch. Your life isn't just yours. It ripples out, affecting hundreds of others. That's why she fought so hard to save you." Claire wiped tears from her face, laughing and crying at the same time. "I believe you. God help me. I completely believe you." The problem with miracles is that they disturb the comfortable order of things. When Claire Donovan returned to Blessed Sacrament Elementary 6 weeks after her surgery, she was 30 pounds lighter, wearing a wig until her hair grew back and carrying a testimony that made people deeply uncomfortable. She told the truth. Not the sanitized version where she'd just had a feeling that led her to get checked out, but the real story. A 9-year-old girl, a vision of the Virgin Mary, a warning that saved her life. She told it to her fellow teachers in the staff lounge, to parents at conferences, to anyone who asked about her medical leave. Principal Marcus Brennan called her into his office 3 days after her return. Marcus Brennan was a man who believed in order, documentation, and the careful separation of church and state, even in a Catholic school. At 54, he ran Blessed Sacrament with the efficiency of a military operation, standardized test scores up, fundraising goals exceeded, zero tolerance for anything that might bring unwanted attention to the institution he'd devoted 15 years to building. "Claire, I'm glad you're recovering well," he began, his hands folded on his desk, in that way administrators do when they're about to say something you won't like. "But I need to talk to you about the narrative you're sharing regarding your diagnosis." "The narrative?" Claire's voice was level. "You mean the truth?" "I mean the story involving a student having visions. It's creating talk among parents, Claire. Some are concerned about Emma Sullivan's mental health. Others are worried about religious extremism in the classroom. We've had 3 complaints this week alone." "Complaints about what exactly?" "About the fact that a child helped save my life." Marcus leaned forward, his expression a practiced blend of sympathy and firmness. "Complaints about inappropriate mysticism being presented as fact. About a student being encouraged in potentially delusional behavior. About staff members lacking professional boundaries." Claire felt heat rising in her chest. "Emma Sullivan is not delusional. She saw something real, something that no medical test or rational explanation prepared me to accept, but something that was objectively, verifiably true. I had a tumor that would have killed me. Now I don't. That's not mysticism, Marcus. That's documented medical fact. The tumor is documented. The mechanism by which you discovered it is what people are questioning. So I'm supposed to lie? Pretend it was just good luck or random intuition? I'm suggesting you might frame it less sensationally, for the good of the school, for Emma's own protection." "Protection from what?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "From becoming a spectacle, from being labeled as troubled or attention-seeking, from having this follow her through her academic career. You of all people should understand the implications of marking a child as different." Claire stood abruptly. "What I understand is that something extraordinary happened, and rather than investigating it with open minds, we're being asked to bury it, because it makes people uncomfortable. Do you know what Emma told me? She said, Mary didn't just want me saved for my sake, but for all the students I would teach, all the lives I would touch. That's not delusion, Marcus, that's profound spiritual insight. It's a 9-year-old girl repeating what she's been told or what she's convinced herself she heard. She described the tumor's location before any scan was done. She specified urgency that doctors confirmed was absolutely accurate. She knew details about a statue she'd never seen. How do you explain that rationally? I don't have to explain it, Claire. And neither do you. What I'm asking, what I'm requiring, is that you stop actively promoting this story on school grounds. If parents ask, refer them to facts. You had a medical issue, you got it treated, you're grateful to be healthy. That's all anyone needs to know. And Emma? Do we just tell her to stop seeing Mary? To ignore whatever messages she's receiving? Marcus's face was stone. I'm telling you to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. What the Sullivan family does in their private spiritual life is their business. What happens in my school is mine. Claire walked out of the office without being dismissed, her hands shaking with suppressed rage. She found Emma in the cafeteria during lunch, sitting alone with a book while other children played around her. The sight broke Claire's heart. Hey, kiddo, she said, sliding into the seat across from Emma. How are you doing? Emma looked up with those old, knowing eyes. People think I'm weird now, don't they? Claire wouldn't lie to her. Some people are having trouble understanding what happened. Change is hard for people, especially when it challenges what they think is possible. The lady said this would happen. She said people would doubt and some would be angry. She said it's okay, though, that the truth doesn't need everyone to believe it to still be true. Emma, are you still seeing her? The lady? Emma nodded. Every day. Sometimes at school, sometimes at home, sometimes in church. She doesn't always talk, but she's always there. It's like having a friend who never leaves. What does she say? Mostly she just smiles. But sometimes she tells me things. She told me you were going to be okay. She told me some people at school would be mad. And she told me. Emma hesitated. What, sweetheart? She told me there's something coming. Something bigger. That what happened with you was just the beginning. And I need to be ready because she's going to ask me to do something brave. A chill ran down Claire's spine. Did she say what? Not yet, but she will when it's time. That night, Rebecca Sullivan received an email from Principal Brennan requesting a meeting to discuss Emma's well-being and recent behavioral concerns. Reading between the administrative lines, Rebecca understood. They were going to try to shut this down, to pathologize her daughter, to make the miracle disappear through diagnosis and documentation. She called Father Quinn, who listened quietly and then said, "The church has a process for investigating claimed apparitions. It's slow, thorough, skeptical. The vast majority are ultimately dismissed as not credible. But Rebecca, whether or not the church ever officially recognizes Emma's visions, you know in your heart what happened. Claire Donovan is alive because your daughter was brave enough to deliver an impossible message. Don't let bureaucracy or fear erase that truth. But what if they try to force Emma into psychological evaluation? What if they use this as evidence she's disturbed? Then you find another school. You protect your daughter. You trust that the same force that saved Claire will continue to guide Emma through whatever comes next." Rebecca sat in her car outside the church, watching evening fall over Portland, and made a decision. She would fight for her daughter's gift, even if it meant standing against the entire rational world. The meeting with Principal Brennan was scheduled for the following Monday, but before that meeting could happen, something occurred that would make Emma Sullivan's visions impossible to dismiss or contain. It happened on Friday morning, during the morning bell, when Emma stood at those same iron gates where she'd first seen the woman in blue and spoken a voice that carried across the schoolyard with unnatural clarity. She says there's danger, fire in the building, the old wiring in the east wing. She says we need to evacuate right now or children will be hurt. Marcus Brennan was halfway through his second cup of coffee, reviewing standardized test preparedness materials, when his secretary burst into his office without knocking, something she'd never done in 7 years, and said 5 words that stopped his heart. Emma Sullivan is prophesying, again. By the time Marcus reached the front gates, a crowd had gathered. Parents who hadn't yet driven away, teachers arriving for morning duty, and at the center of it all, Emma Sullivan standing with her hands raised like a tiny prophet, her voice impossibly clear and powerful for a 9-year-old. The lady says the wiring is burning inside the walls where no one can see, the east wing, where the 3rd and 4th grades are. She says smoke is already filling the spaces between the floors. She says we have minutes, not hours. We need to get everyone out now. Marcus felt his face flush with anger and embarrassment. This was exactly the kind of spectacle he'd tried to prevent. "Emma, that's enough. You need to calm down and—" "Mr. Brennan, I can smell something." The voice came from behind him. Janine Reeves, the art teacher, whose classroom was in the east wing. "I've been smelling it since I arrived 15 minutes ago. I thought it was someone burning leaves nearby, but Emma's right. It smells like electrical fire." Marcus turned to her, irritated. "You're enabling a child's—" He never finished the sentence. At that exact moment, smoke began seeping from the second-floor windows of the east wing. Not the thick black smoke of full combustion, but the gray-white smoke of smoldering wires, hidden fire eating its way through walls. For one frozen second, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Marcus grabbed his radio. "All staff, immediate evacuation. This is not a drill. Evacuate all students to the north parking lot. Move now." Inside the building, teachers who hadn't yet reached their classrooms turned around, gathering students who were just arriving. The school's fire alarm system, ironically scheduled for inspection later that week, remained silent because the fire hadn't yet generated enough heat to trigger the sensors. But the human sensors, alerted by a 9-year-old girl who said the Virgin Mary told her, were already moving. Claire Donovan, whose classroom was in the East Wing, emerged with her students in a tight cluster, counting heads frantically. 16 third graders, all accounted for, moving quickly toward the exits. Behind them, smoke was now visibly thickening in the hallway. The Portland Fire Bureau arrived 6 minutes later, an eternity when you're watching smoke pour from a building full of children, but blistering fast for emergency response. Firefighters stormed the building in full gear while students and staff stood in the parking lot, some crying, some praying, all shaken. Fire Chief David Morrison emerged 30 minutes later with his helmet under his arm and an expression Rebecca would never forget. Part professional composure, part barely concealed astonishment. "You got everyone out?" he said to Marcus. "How did you know?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, looked helplessly at Emma Sullivan standing next to her mother. "A student reported smelling smoke," Marcus finally said, which was technically true but completely inadequate. Chief Morrison shook his head. The fire was in the wall cavities behind electrical panels. No visible flame, no significant heat signature yet, just slow combustion that had been going for probably hours. Your alarm system hadn't triggered because it was below threshold. If everyone had been in those classrooms when it reached critical mass. He paused, seeming to reconsider what he was about to say in front of children. "Let's just say you'd be dealing with a very different situation." "How did the student know?" Rebecca stepped forward, her hand on Emma's shoulder. "Tell him, Emma." Emma looked up at the fire chief with those impossibly calm eyes. "The lady told me, the woman in blue. She showed me the fire inside the walls and said we needed to get everyone out before it got worse." Chief Morrison looked at Rebecca, then at Emma, then back at Marcus. "The woman in blue. My daughter has been having visions of the Virgin Mary," Rebecca said clearly, loudly enough that everyone nearby could hear. "She warned a teacher about an undiagnosed brain tumor that was caught in time. And this morning she warned us about a fire that was invisible to every safety system in this building. Make of that what you will." The silence that followed was profound. Then Claire Donovan stepped forward, pulling off her wig to reveal her short-cropped hair still growing back from surgery. "I'm the teacher," she said. "The tumor was real. I had a grade 2 astrocytoma that would have killed me if Emma hadn't insisted I get checked. The doctors confirmed I had no symptoms yet, that I wouldn't have known anything was wrong until it was too late. She saved my life." Another teacher spoke up. Marcus hadn't even noticed Father Quinn arriving, but there he was in his collar, standing at the edge of the crowd. "Emma Sullivan is my parishioner. I've known her family for years. What she's describing is consistent with documented Marian apparitions throughout church history. Warnings, healings, prophetic knowledge of hidden dangers." Marcus felt control of the situation slipping through his fingers like water. "Father, with all respect, we can't run a school based on mystical." "Mr. Brennan," Chief Morrison cut him off. "I don't care if she got her information from the Virgin Mary, a ghost, or really good intuition. That little girl just prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of life. The fire was minutes, maybe 10, 15 at most, from reaching critical combustion. If those classrooms had been full." He trailed off, shaking his head. Emma spoke into the silence, her voice clear and unwavering. "She says this is why she came. Not just for Mrs. Donovan, although that was important, but for this moment, to show everyone that God still sends warnings, still protects his children, still works miracles. She says people have forgotten how to listen for divine voices because they're so loud with their own noise. But she's been here all along, watching, waiting, ready to help when we're ready to hear." A parent in the crowd, a woman Rebecca recognized from school pickup but whose name she didn't know, began to cry. "I believe you," she said. "My God, I believe you." Another parent joined her. "I saw her this morning. I thought I was imagining it. A woman in blue standing by the flagpole, but I saw her." Then another. "My son came home last week and said there was a pretty lady who smiled at him at school. I told him he was making it up." The testimonies began tumbling out one after another. Small moments easy to dismiss individually, but together forming a pattern. Children seeing a woman in blue. Parents catching glimpses of something impossible. A presence that had been there all along, waiting to be acknowledged. Marcus Brennan stood in the parking lot of the school he'd run with such careful control for 15 years and felt the ground shift beneath him. Not physically, but spiritually, philosophically, the tectonic plates of his worldview realigning. "Emma," he said, his voice rough, "I owe you an apology. I tried to silence you, to explain away what you were seeing. You could have listened to me. You could have stopped speaking up, but you didn't, and because of your courage, everyone in that building is safe right now." Emma walked over to him and did something that broke every remaining wall around his heart. She took his hand. "The lady said you were scared, that you love this school so much you were afraid of anything that might hurt it. But she says real faith isn't safe. It's wild and wonderful, and it asks us to trust even when everything seems impossible." Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, this small girl with copper braids and eyes that had seen heaven. "What else does she say?" Emma smiled. "She says there are other places that need protecting, other people who need warnings. She wants to know if you'll help me tell them, or if you'll try to stop me again." Marcus looked at the smoking building, at the firefighters working to extinguish flames that could have killed dozens of children, at the crowd of parents and teachers who were now looking at Emma Sullivan not as a troubled child, but as something else entirely. "I'll help," he said. "Whatever you need, I'll help." The story hit the local news that afternoon. Child's warning prevents school fire tragedy. By evening, it was national. 9-year-old claims Virgin Mary warned her of hidden fire. Within 3 days, it was international, with film crews from Catholic news organizations arriving in Portland, Vatican officials making cautious statements about investigating the claims, and the Archbishop of Portland announcing a formal inquiry into possible miraculous phenomena. Emma took it all with the same peaceful certainty she'd shown from the beginning. Yes, she told reporters, she still saw the lady. Yes, the lady had messages. No, she wasn't afraid. Yes, she understood that some people wouldn't believe her. "That's okay," she said during one interview that would be replayed millions of times. "The lady says belief isn't required for truth to be true, but she also says that for people who are ready to listen, who are ready to believe that heaven still speaks to earth, miracles are waiting everywhere. We just have to have eyes to see them." 6 months later, the church's investigative commission concluded that while they couldn't definitively prove supernatural origin, they could find no evidence of fraud, delusion, or manipulation. Emma's visions remained a mystery, unexplainable by conventional means, but bearing fruit that was undeniably good. Claire Donovan was alive and cancer-free. 73 students and 12 staff members had been evacuated before a fire reached critical mass, and a small Catholic school in Portland had become an unexpected beacon of faith renewal, with families driving hours just to attend Mass in the parish where Emma Sullivan worshipped. The statue of Mary, the O'Connell family statue that had survived generations, was installed in a place of honor in the school's entrance hall, where Emma had first seen the woman in blue. Flowers surrounded it constantly, placed there by grateful parents, healed teachers, and believers who came from across the country seeking their own miracles. Emma herself remained remarkably normal, still got frustrated with math homework, still played with friends at recess, still sometimes forgot her lunchbox. But she also continued to see the lady, and when she did, she listened carefully and delivered the messages with courage. "The lady says her job isn't finished," Emma told her mother one evening as they knelt before the statue in their living room. "She says there are other children who need to learn to listen, other people who need warnings and healing and hope. She wants to teach me how to help them." Rebecca looked at her daughter, this small, miraculous child who had somehow become a bridge between heaven and earth, and felt overwhelming gratitude mixed with fear. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more skeptics, more challenges, more moments when the burden of this gift seemed too heavy for such small shoulders. But there would also be miracles. Rebecca took Emma's hand. "Then we'll learn together," she said. "Whatever the lady asks, whatever comes next, We'll face it together." Emma smiled, and for just a moment the statue behind her seemed to glow with its own light. Or perhaps it was just the evening sun through the window. Or perhaps it was something more. In the end, Rebecca decided it didn't matter which explanation was true. What mattered was that her daughter had been chosen for something extraordinary, that lives had been saved, that faith had been renewed in hearts that had forgotten how to hope. What mattered was that the impossible had reached down and touched the ordinary world, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. Share this story with someone who needs a miracle right now, and subscribe to Walk Daily with Our Lady. The Blessed Mother never stops watching over her children. In Portland, through the eyes of a 9-year-old girl, she proved once again that heaven is never as far away as we think, and that miracles still happen for those brave enough to believe.